DeShawn Carter was 13 when his teacher told him to aim lower, right before he solved a math problem that had stumped MIT for decades. In front of a laughing class, she mocked his bus driver father. But what she didn't know, DeShawn had already cracked a proof that would shake the world. By the time the truth surfaced, she was accepting an award in his name. And that's when the first anonymous email leaked. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. In the beige-bricked corridors of Eastwood Middle School in suburban Georgia, the rhythm of bells and sneakers on tile barely masked the quiet hierarchies at play. Teachers greeted students differently. The children of realtors and surgeons received warm nods, long eye contact, and praise for the most basic efforts. The others, the children of custodians, clerks, or like DeShawn Carter, the school bus driver, were offered silence or subtle sighs, reminders that their place was conditional. DeShawn sat in the second row of room 208. His math notebook pristine, edges aligned with military precision. A pair of wire-rimmed glasses rested low on his nose, often slipping as he hunched forward, scribbling equations far beyond his grade level. He rarely raised his hand, not out of disinterest, but out of survival. Attention, he had learned, was not always a reward. Miss Kellerman, the math teacher, wore her judgment like perfume. Subtle to some, suffocating to others. She had a master's degree from a prestigious university and made no effort to hide her bias toward the children of her peers. Engineers, architects, and tech executives who donated to the school fund and attended PTA galas in tailored blazers. She introduced these students in class with an extra flourish, often linking their academic strengths to their parents' professions. Of course, Ava got the problem right. Her mom's a neurologist, she'd say with a proud smile. When she read the name DeShawn Carter on the first day of class, her brow furrowed just slightly. "You're Marcus Carter's boy? The bus driver?" DeShawn nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She gave him a tight smile. "All right, well, let's hope you're better with numbers than directions." The class snickered. DeShawn didn't flinch, but inside, something coiled tighter. He wasn't looking to be a star student. He only wanted fairness. But fairness was scarce in room. Weeks passed. Miss Kellerman called on DeShawn only when she expected him to stumble. She handed out challenging problems, like landmines, placing them squarely in the paths of students she quietly believed didn't belong in honors math. When DeShawn got them right, she would nod without comment, then pivot to another student, lavishing them with praise for far simpler answers. Yet DeShawn kept solving, not for grades, for himself. At home, math was his haven. While his father cooked fried catfish in the kitchen and hummed Sam Cooke, DeShawn would sit at the dining table and explore complex theories he downloaded from open-source college databases. Marcus didn't understand the math, but he understood the effort. He always did the dishes so DeShawn's study rhythm wouldn't be broken. "You're onto something, big boy," Marcus would say. "You keep pushing, let the world catch up." But the world, or at least Miss Kellerman, wasn't interested in catching up. One crisp October morning, the tension finally peaked. Miss Kellerman had assigned a pop quiz meant to separate the top-tier students from the rest. At the end of the test, she wrote a bonus question on the whiteboard, a complex geometry puzzle lifted from a university-level problem set. She smirked as she wrote it, turning to the class with exaggerated drama. "Let's see if any of our gifted minds can solve this one." The class leaned in. Most stared blankly. A few scribbled nonsense. Miss Kellerman walked up and down the aisles, her heels clacking with authority. When she reached DeShawn, she paused. "You giving that one a try, Mr. Carter?" she asked, her voice loud enough for the class to hear. "Bit ambitious, don't you think?" DeShawn looked up slowly. "I'll give it a shot." "Oh, I'm sure you will," she said, her tone oozing sarcasm. DeShawn's pencil scratched rhythmically across the paper. For 10 minutes, the classroom was silent, except for the occasional sigh and chair creak. When time was called, Ms. Kellerman collected the papers quickly, eager to review them. After school, she stayed late, grading at her desk, red pen in hand. As she moved through the quizzes, her expression remained neutral, until she reached DeShawn's. Her brows knit together, then lifted. She reread his solution. Not once, 3 times. She didn't understand it, not fully, and it made her uncomfortable. The next morning, she returned the papers without comment. DeShawn's was blank where the grade usually went. No checkmark, no praise, nothing. But something was off. During lunch, One of the AP teachers, Mr. Boyle, approached Miss Kellerman in the faculty lounge. "Hey, did you assign that infinity curve teaser to your class?" he asked, sipping coffee. Miss Kellerman blinked. "Infinity curve? Yeah, I saw one of your students posted a solution to it on a math forum last night. Same problem, right? That's the one unsolved geometry riddle that's been floating around for years. Crazy coincidence." Her stomach dropped. She forced a laugh. "Oh, that? Just a little bonus problem. I didn't think anyone would actually attempt it." Mr. Boyle raised an eyebrow. "Well, someone did. And the crazy part, their logic checks out. A few university people are already commenting on it." Kellerman's throat tightened. She muttered something about needing to make copies, and left the lounge. She didn't know DeShawn had posted his solution online. She didn't know he used an anonymous handle. She didn't know the academic world was already talking. But she would find out. Because the problem she used to humiliate him turned out to be unsolvable by anyone but DeShawn. The next morning, a mysterious email arrived from Switzerland. The parent-teacher conference at Eastwood Middle had the air of a social event disguised as an academic obligation. SUVs gleamed under the parking lot lights, and the hallways were filled with the smell of perfume and expensive cologne. Parents in tailored coats carried portfolios, notepads, and confidence. Their conversations echoed softly, talk of Ivy League summer programs, private tutors, and gifted student grants. Marcus Carter stepped into the same hallway with oil-stained hands and a faded blue uniform shirt that read District Transportation. His smile was polite, but cautious. The kind of smile worn by a man used to being looked at, but not seen. He had driven the same school bus for 16 years. Most teachers barely knew his name. He held DeShawn's report card carefully, as if it might break. Despite the grades being strong, A's in math and science, solid B's elsewhere, he had circled the comments section 3 times. There in Kellerman's tidy handwriting was the line that sat heavy on his mind. DeShawn shows effort but may need to adjust expectations. The words didn't sit right. Adjust expectations sounded like a polite way of saying, know your place. When he reached room 208, Ms. Kellerman greeted the parents ahead of him with warmth. She shook hands, laughed easily, and complimented outfits. When she turned to Marcus, the smile was delayed, smaller, thinner. "Oh, Mr. Carter," she said, voice flattening. "Thank you for coming. I didn't expect you'd be able to make it, with your schedule." Marcus nodded slowly. "I made sure to. My son's work mattered." "Of course," she said, glancing at his shirt before motioning him to sit. "Well, let's see here." She slid DeShawn's report card across the desk as if presenting evidence. "Your son has potential. He's very eager, which is wonderful. But sometimes, effort doesn't always translate to gifted capability." Marcus frowned slightly. "He loves math. He studies every night. If there's something he's missing, I'd like to know so I can help him." Ms. Kellerman offered a polite chuckle, but her eyes didn't match. "Well, Mr. Carter, the truth is, there are natural learners and then there are hard workers. DeShawn's a hard worker. That's something to be proud of." Marcus tilted his head. "I'm proud. Sure. But you think he's not a natural?" She folded her hands. "He struggles with abstract reasoning. And, well, I think it's best to focus on realistic goals. College may not be the only path for every student, and there's no shame in that." The sentence hung in the air like fog. Marcus felt it sting, not because of the words, but because of what sat behind them. The quiet certainty that his son's dreams didn't fit the mold she had already chosen for him. DeShawn stood just outside the door, pretending to look at a bulletin board filled with science fair photos. Through the cracked door, he could hear every word. His chest tightened. He wasn't surprised, not really, but hearing her talk about him like that, while his father sat there being polite, hurt worse than anything. He leaned against the wall, eyes burning, as his father spoke calmly. "With all due respect, ma'am, my boy's got a brain that won't quit. He's not looking for a handout. He's looking for a challenge." Ms. Kellerman smiled tightly again, brushing invisible dust off her sleeve. "I understand, Mr. Carter. But you see, there's a difference between confidence and delusion. Sometimes we as parents push our children toward things that aren't aligned with their abilities." Marcus sat still, his jaw tight. He didn't argue. Years of subtle condescension had taught him when a fight was unwinnable. He simply said, "He'll prove you wrong someday." Her reply came sharp, but controlled. "That's what every parent says." The meeting ended quickly. When Marcus left, he thanked her for her time. Still polite, still proud, DeShawn followed a few steps behind him, silent until they reached the car. The night air outside the school was crisp, carrying the hum of crickets and the distant sound of a football game. The parking lot lights cast long shadows. Marcus unlocked the old Ford truck and paused before starting it. "You heard all that, didn't you?" DeShawn hesitated, then nodded. Marcus looked straight ahead. "You don't let nobody tell you what you can't do. Not me, not her, not anyone. You hear me?" "I hear you," DeShawn said softly. Marcus smiled faintly. "Good, 'cause that lady don't know what's coming." They drove home in silence. DeShawn watched the streetlights flicker across the windshield like passing thoughts. The pain settled deep, not from embarrassment, but from realization. He understood now that intelligence wasn't enough in a world that decided who mattered before they even spoke. That night, as Marcus dozed off in his recliner after dinner, DeShawn sat at the old desktop computer, in the corner of their small living room. The machine buzzed, the fan rattled, and the internet connection crawled, but his mind moved faster than anything around him. He opened the file he'd been working on in secret, pages of equations, drawn diagrams, and lines of logic that stretched across digital notebooks. The problem that obsessed him was one his teacher had mocked: the infinity curve theorem. He had been studying it for weeks, cross-referencing university archives and academic forums far beyond his grade level. He knew he wasn't supposed to understand it, but he did. The patterns made sense in a way words never could. He sat upright, heart pounding, as he pieced together the final link, the proof that connected the impossible. His pencil tapped against the desk as he double-checked his work. Everything held. It was elegant. It was flawless. For a moment he stared at the screen, unsure what to do. Then he remembered her words. Realistic goals. He clicked submit on an anonymous academic forum, one frequently visited by professors from MIT, Princeton, and Cambridge. The upload bar crawled slowly, each second feeling like an eternity. When it finished, the screen flashed confirmation. Submission received. DeShawn leaned back, heart thudding, realizing what he had done. He wasn't just fighting Miss Kellerman anymore. He was challenging a system that had already written his ending. Outside, a bus rumbled past in the night. The same model his father drove every day. DeShawn smiled faintly. That same night, DeShawn secretly submitted a math proof online, one even MIT professors had failed to crack. The grainy video began like any classroom footage, slanted, shaky, and nearly silent at first. The lens caught Miss Kellerman pacing across the whiteboard, smirking as she turned toward a seated DeShawn Carter. Her words were clipped but clear, amplified by the microphone clipped to her blazer. "Mr. Carter, let's not get ahead of ourselves. You may want to aim a little lower. College-level math isn't for everyone." The class tittered. She added, "Nothing wrong with sticking to what runs in the family, right? Bus routes are reliable." The laugh wasn't just mean. It was layered with something darker, permission, and someone in the third row had captured it all. By morning, the clip was posted to TikTok by a classmate with just 42 followers. Within hours, it had over 100,000 views. By evening, it hit 1 million. The caption read, "Teacher tells bus driver's son to stop dreaming. Wait for it." But the wait never paid off. Not in the way virality usually demands. There was no confrontation, no tears, no grand rebuttal from DeShawn. He just sat there, quiet and still, eyes locked forward, while his dignity was chipped away in front of his peers. And that silence, that unbearable quiet, was what made the video so haunting. The comments began pouring in. Some were furious, others dismissive. How's she still employed? This is why kids give up. She said that to a child. In public. Private school attitude in a public school paycheck. But the virality didn't penetrate the school walls. The administration held no emergency meetings. No teacher was suspended. The principal issued a vague memo about respect in the classroom, with no names and no responsibility. PTA members whispered but took no action. The school board quietly flagged the video as miscontextualized, suggesting the public misunderstood what was intended as a motivational prompt. Miss Kellerman deleted her social media accounts, but in the classroom her behavior didn't change. She taught the next lesson with her usual poised cruelty, never acknowledging what had happened. And DeShawn? He noticed the stares. Some students avoided him. Others offered pitying glances, which hurt just as much. A few classmates muttered things like, "She kinda has a point, and that's just how she is with everyone." But they were lying. She wasn't like that with Ava, or Eli, or Carter Montgomery, whose dad chaired the district's foundation. The worst part wasn't the humiliation. It was the silence that followed. The world saw it, commented, and moved on. Except for one comment. Buried deep in the thread, lost beneath the outrage and jokes, was a simple post from an anonymous user. That kid is smarter than all of them. Wait until they realize it. DeShawn saw it at 1:14 a.m. He read it 10 times. No username. No profile picture. Just that one line. He clicked on the user account private. One post. No followers. It had been created the same day the video went viral. A flicker of something stirred in DeShawn. Not hope. Not yet. But attention. Someone saw him. Someone really saw him. The next day, the school halls buzzed with the residue of internet infamy. DeShawn walked slower than usual, feeling every pair of eyes on him. Some curious, some amused, some filled with that sticky southern politeness that covers up bigotry with a smile. Teachers didn't mention the video. Most avoided looking at him altogether. Except for one. Mr. Langston, the janitor, nodded at him from the end of the hallway. Keep your head, son, he said quietly. Storms pass. That meant more than any apology would have. In math class, Miss Kellerman resumed as if nothing had happened. She wore a navy blazer and pearl earrings, her posture tight, her voice even tighter. When she handed back the graded pop quiz, she didn't look at DeShawn. His paper had a large red 0. No explanation. But DeShawn didn't react. Not today. That afternoon, he returned to the same forum, where he had submitted the infinity curve proof. He logged in and found something unusual. His post had been viewed over 600 times. Multiple comments had popped up beneath it. One said, "Where did you learn this method?" Another, "This is a legitimate solution. It aligns with the model Stanford researchers proposed last spring." And another, "This proves convergence. Has anyone verified the post author?" DeShawn's heart began to race. He scrolled faster. At the bottom was a message flagged as admin only. He clicked it. "If this solution is original, please respond with a formal declaration of authorship. This proof is under review by multiple academic institutions. Further inquiries may follow." He stared at the message for nearly an hour. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. Type it, he thought. Say it's yours. But he hesitated. What if it backfired? What if they didn't believe him? Finally, he typed a short response. "My name is DeShawn Carter. I'm 13. I go to Eastwood Middle School in Georgia. I solved it myself." He clicked send. Then he shut off the monitor, leaned back, and closed his eyes. His father was still out late, covering a double shift. The house was quiet. But something had changed. The next morning, DeShawn woke early. A soft chime from the computer jolted him upright. He rubbed his eyes and sat down at the desk. One new email. No subject. From a domain he didn't recognize. He opened it slowly. The body of the email read, "Your submission has reached the Mathematics Board at the Institute of Advanced Theory, Geneva. Please confirm a time for a virtual meeting. We would like to verify authorship and accuracy with you directly." At the bottom was a signature in elegant script. Dr. Emil Hochstadt, Chair, Department of Mathematical Sciences, Geneva, Switzerland. The next morning, a mysterious email arrived from Switzerland. The email from Switzerland glowed on the screen, casting a pale hue across DeShawn's face, as morning light filtered weakly through the blinds. He read the message again, then again, not trusting his own eyes. "Your submission has reached the Mathematics Board at the Institute of Advanced Theory, Geneva. Please confirm a time for a virtual meeting. We would like to verify authorship and accuracy with you directly." For a long moment, he didn't move. It felt surreal, like opening a door and finding the universe staring back. He whispered the name softly. Geneva. That one word felt like it belonged in another lifetime. In another boy's mouth. But here it was, addressed to him. DeShawn Carter, 8th grader from Georgia. Son of a bus driver, occupant of the back row in a classroom that refused to see him. By 3:30 p.m. he had rushed home and double-checked the time zones twice. Marcus, still unaware, was out on another route. DeShawn logged into the Zoom link with a borrowed tie around his neck, sitting on a kitchen chair with a cereal box propping up his laptop camera. His heart thudded with such force he thought it might shake the screen. Then the digital meeting room opened. 4 individuals sat in a well-lit virtual conference, all dressed in dark suits, backdrops lined with whiteboards and leather-bound books. But one figure stood out. Immediately and overwhelmingly, Dr. Elia Dubois. Her presence was calm but commanding. Her skin, the color of polished bronze, framed sharp, intelligent eyes. She wasn't just a mathematician. She was a force of nature, the first black woman to win the Fields Medal, the mind behind 4 major theorems taught at the graduate level, and here she was, looking directly at DeShawn through the screen. "Good afternoon," she said smoothly. "Are you the author of the infinity curve solution?" DeShawn swallowed. "Yes, ma'am. I am." A pause. Dr. Hochstadt, chair of the Geneva Institute, leaned forward slightly. His Swiss accent was crisp. "May we ask how you encountered the problem?" DeShawn adjusted his glasses. "I saw it on an old math forum. I didn't know what it was at first. I just liked the way the curve spiraled. It felt like a rhythm I could follow." Dr. Dubois blinked. "You saw the pattern?" He nodded. "The solution," she said softly, "was beautiful, precise, intuitive. It took me 2 hours to verify. I still don't fully understand how someone your age could intuit curvature like that." DeShawn shrugged. It just made sense. The room fell quiet. They peppered him with questions, complex inquiries on convergence, dimensionality, and limit behavior. He answered calmly, pulling out his original handwritten pages when asked. He traced each step with an ease that made even Hochstadt sit back, impressed. When it ended, none of them spoke for several seconds. Dr. Dubois finally broke the silence. "You understand this changes everything," she said. "This problem has haunted the mathematical community for nearly 40 years. Entire teams at MIT and Cambridge have tried and failed, and you solved it alone." "I didn't know it was unsolved," DeShawn said quietly. A stunned chuckle escaped one of the other researchers. "That may be the most remarkable part." Then came a shift in tone. Dr. Dubois leaned closer to her camera. "What does your school know of this?" DeShawn hesitated. "Nothing. My teacher thinks I should keep my expectations realistic." Silence fell again, this time heavier. Dr. Dubois tapped a pen against her notebook. "That is tragically familiar." DeShawn didn't respond, but something inside him swelled. Not pride, not yet, but validation. Someone who mattered finally saw him. "I'd like to mentor you," she said softly but firmly. "Personally. And I'd like to nominate you for the Young Theorists program. It's selective. It's international. And it's never had a student younger than 15. But for you, we will make an exception." DeShawn blinked rapidly. "Are you sure I'm ready?" She smiled. "You already proved it." After the call, DeShawn sat frozen in front of the screen, replaying her words in his mind. The kitchen was still. The TV still on mute. The apartment hadn't changed. But when Marcus came home, DeShawn told him everything. The problem, the email, the meeting, the mentorship. Marcus didn't say a word at first. Then he stepped forward and placed both hands on his son's shoulders. "You were never just a bus driver's kid," he said. "You're a storm." That night, DeShawn couldn't sleep. He sat at the window, thinking about everything that had happened, and everything still to come. Then, near midnight, his inbox pinged again. A new message. Subject line: request from Dr. Elia Dubois, Ugent. Body: we've just received a request from another mathematician who wishes to speak with you directly. They've asked us to arrange a private Zoom meeting. The request came from a Nobel laureate. A Nobel-winning mathematician requested a Zoom call with the unknown solver. The Zoom window blinked open again, but this time it was different. The call wasn't part of a group meeting or academic roundtable. It was just 2 people, DeShawn Carter, sitting at the same rickety kitchen table in his Georgia apartment, and Professor Elia Dubois, Nobel laureate, Fields Medal winner, and arguably the most respected mathematician alive. She appeared framed by warm light and a towering wall of books, her presence serene, but undeniably sharp. Every word she had ever published had been dissected in university classrooms. But today, she wasn't the one doing the teaching. "Hello again, DeShawn," she said, her voice level, but her eyes flickering with intensity. "I've reviewed your full submission, twice, and I also passed it to 2 of my graduate researchers, anonymously. They both assumed it came from a tenured professor at MIT. DeShawn's lips parted slightly. "Did they understand it?" "One tried. The other gave up halfway," she replied, not unkindly. "You've created something that walks the line between logic and art. You've done in 3 pages what full departments have failed to in decades." He swallowed. "Thank you. I didn't mean to make it a big thing. I just saw something that made sense to me." Her head tilted. Tell me who taught you to see that way. DeShawn hesitated. No one. I mean, my dad lets me read math journals online, and I follow a few forums, but I guess it's just the way my brain works. Elia leaned forward. Her face took on a new expression, one that DeShawn couldn't quite place. Not admiration, not disbelief. Something more complex. You're telling me a 13-year-old solved this? She murmured, as if confirming it to herself. He nodded slowly. Then came a pause. A long one. And you're from Georgia? Yes, ma'am. What school? Eastwood Middle. It's public. Her face stiffened, just slightly. And your parents? My mom passed away when I was 6. It's just me and my dad now. He drives the school bus. Elia sat back, crossing her arms slowly. The warmth in her voice cooled, almost imperceptibly. I see, she said, her tone neutral now. It happened in a single sentence. The shift. DeShawn recognized it instantly. That invisible turn where praise met boundaries, where admiration met ceilings, where brilliance was acknowledged, but not expected to rise too high. You have a rare gift, she continued. But I want to give you some advice. Stay humble. Don't rush ahead of yourself. Sometimes institutions can be slow to accept people who come from, let's say, non-traditional backgrounds. DeShawn blinked. What do you mean? I mean, she said gently, be cautious. The academic world doesn't always open doors as fast as your talent deserves. There are politics, and people, and expectations. Let them get used to you before you start making demands. Her words landed with the weight of experience, but not entirely encouragement. He nodded politely. But inside, something wilted. He had expected awe, celebration, maybe even a spark of belief. But what he got instead was a reminder of the same coded caution he'd heard his whole life. Still, Elia wasn't finished. I'm offering to sponsor you for the Young Theorists program, she said. It's highly selective. You'd be the youngest participant ever. You'll need parental consent, and you'll work remotely with university-level mentors. But she paused. Keep your head down. No need to make a spectacle of yourself right now. DeShawn's voice was steady. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Good. Then we'll proceed. You'll receive documents later today. Keep me updated. The call ended with polite nods. The screen went black, and DeShawn sat there, staring at the empty reflection in the monitor. Not defeated, but changed. It wasn't her words that lingered. It was her pause, that subtle hesitation when she heard where he was from and who he was. He closed the laptop slowly and turned his gaze to the window. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting amber light across the apartment complex. The familiar sound of his father's bus braking outside signaled his return. When Marcus stepped in, DeShawn didn't speak immediately. He just hugged him. Tight. Long. Marcus held him back, confused. What's all this? I talked to Professor Dubois again. And? She's gonna help. Kinda. Just, she said I shouldn't expect too much. Marcus stepped back. Expect too much? From who? For what? DeShawn shook his head. It's okay. I get it. I think I'm just not the kind of person they expect to be doing this stuff. Marcus's eyes darkened, not with anger, but with recognition. Then we remind them, he said softly. Every time. That night, DeShawn lay in bed, his mind restless. Elia Dubois, his hero, believed in his proof, but not quite in him, not all the way. He felt the sting, but he didn't let it anchor him. Instead, he opened his phone and scrolled the math forums again. His solution thread now had over 11,000 views. Professors were commenting. University labs were referencing it. And then amid the replies, a new post appeared. Short. Unverified. From a user with no picture, no name. Funding offer for the author. DM me. Urgent. DeShawn blinked. Was it spam? Then he checked his inbox. A new message. Subject. Private interest. Future investment inquiry. Body. I represent a private foundation that closely monitors young prodigies in mathematics, physics, and theoretical sciences. We are aware of your work. Our founder would like to fund your development privately, no strings attached. If you're open to a conversation, reply to this address. We value discretion. At the bottom, a signature. A. Kellen Thorne. Or Thorne Tech Initiative. DeShawn froze. Kellen Thorne, the reclusive tech billionaire behind the world's most advanced AI company. Known for rarely appearing in public. Known for investing in rare genius. But a shadowy tech billionaire saw the viral thread and wanted to fund DeShawn's future. The message from Thorn Tech didn't come through official school channels. It wasn't routed through guidance counselors or board meetings. It arrived directly in DeShawn's inbox, encrypted, discreet, and signed with only 5 words that said everything and nothing at once. "We believe in your mind." Marcus didn't believe it at first. "Some scam maybe," he muttered, holding the printed email like it might explode. Why would a tech billionaire want anything to do with a kid from DeKalb County? But 2 days later, a black sedan rolled up in front of their apartment complex. No logos, no press, just a suited man with calm eyes and a government clearance tone. He handed Marcus an envelope with a non-disclosure agreement inside and an embossed plane ticket. First class. Direct to San Francisco.
"No press," the man said. "No photos. Mr. Thorne prefers privacy."
DeShawn clutched the envelope the whole way to the airport. Not from fear, but disbelief. Every checkpoint they passed, every velvet rope they were ushered around, reminded him this wasn't a school field trip. When they landed, a car swept them straight to Thorn Tech headquarters, a towering complex of glass and steel that shimmered like the future. Security scanned their fingerprints, then their retinas. Marcus looked at DeShawn with raised brows. "You sure this ain't a movie set?" Inside, everything was white, quiet, and humming with invisible intelligence. The walls adjusted their lighting based on who walked by. Coffee appeared before you knew you were thirsty. At the top floor, past a corridor of living walls and algorithmically generated art, sat the man himself, Kellen Thorne. He wore no tie, just a black button-down and clear-framed glasses. His hair was silver at the temples, his eyes unreadable. The room had no windows, just massive screens showing rotating satellite feeds and neural activity maps. He stood when DeShawn entered. "You're the boy who solved the infinity curve," he said, offering a hand. DeShawn shook it, his fingers trembling slightly. "And you must be Marcus," Thorne added, turning to his father. "Thank you for coming. I don't take meetings lightly." They sat. No formalities. No entourage. "I read your proof," Kellen said to DeShawn. "It took me a day. I had 2 engineers walk out of my office because they didn't believe a middle schooler wrote it." DeShawn flushed. "I didn't mean for it to go viral, but it did," Thorne said. "And that makes you a risk, which is why I'm interested." Marcus raised a brow. "A risk? My son's not a liability." "No, Mr. Carter," Thorne replied. "He's a disruption, and in my world, disruption is the highest currency." He stood, walked to a screen, and tapped twice. A global map appeared, highlighting regions where DeShawn's solution was already being tested for advanced AI modeling, weather prediction, even military targeting algorithms. "Your theorem," Thorne said, "opened new paths in computational curvature we thought were decades away. We've already modeled your framework into one of our quantum networks." DeShawn blinked. "Already?" Thorne nodded. "We move fast here, which is why I'd like to move fast with you." He tapped another panel. "Full scholarship. Global mentorship. You'll study under 5 of the top mathematicians in the world. Paris, Tokyo, Cape Town, New York. All expenses covered. You'll live wherever you want. Remote learning. Full lab access. A custom AI assistant trained on your learning pattern, and will pay your family a monthly stipend." Marcus leaned forward. "And what do you want in return?" Thorne's smile thinned. "That's the right question." He walked over to a low cabinet, retrieved a slim file, and handed it to Marcus. Inside was a contract. 5 pages, all bullet points. At the bottom was a clause labeled Intellectual Partnership Agreement. "You won't owe me your work," Thorne said, "but we'll have first look access. If you invent something that changes the world, and I believe you will, we'll have a seat at the table. Nothing binding, just an invitation." Marcus stared at the page, lips pressed tight. "You want my son to sell his future. I want him to own it," Thorne said. "But in the right rooms." There was silence. DeShawn looked between them. Then he asked, carefully, "Why me? You could fund 10,000 kids like me." "Because," Thorne replied, 10,000 kids didn't solve what you solved. You did. And I like betting early on things people underestimate." Marcus still wasn't convinced. "You say it's about access, opportunity, disruption. But my boy ain't a token. You try to make him a headline." "No press," Thorne interrupted. "No cameras. No hashtags. I don't need him to inspire anyone. I need him to build the future." That silenced the room. DeShawn turned to his dad. I want this, Pops. Not for the money, for the math. This, this is the door I've never seen before. Marcus exhaled. I just don't want you to lose who you are. I won't, DeShawn promised. Not even for $1 billion. Kellen Thorne extended his hand again. Then we have an agreement. DeShawn shook it, this time without fear. The elevator ride down was silent. When they stepped out into the dusk of San Francisco, the city lights sparkled like a million possibilities. Marcus wrapped an arm around his son's shoulder. You sure you're ready for this? DeShawn nodded. They've been telling me I'm not ready for everything. I think it's time I stop listening. Back home in Georgia, the announcement was made, quietly. His teachers weren't told the full story. Miss Kellerman received a vague memo that DeShawn had been accepted into an advanced study program and would be transitioning to a remote academic model. She rolled her eyes when she read it. Figures, she muttered to the secretary. Parents these days think a viral moment makes a genius. But in a lab in Geneva, DeShawn's name had already been added to a database of contributors shaping the next generation of artificial intelligence. And at Thorne Tech, a codename was created for his profile. Curvature. Only Kellen Thorne and his chief innovation officer knew what it meant. But that night, as DeShawn lay in a guest suite overlooking the Pacific, a single message popped into his inbox. From Kellen Ed Thorne at Tech. Subject. One condition. Body. You'll learn faster than anyone. You'll create things we haven't imagined yet. But the condition still stands. You never forget where you came from. The moment you do, we're done. Kellen gave DeShawn a full-ride global scholarship, with one major condition. While DeShawn settled into a whirlwind of late-night Zoom calls, private mentorships, and modules designed by world-class theorists, a quieter storm began to brew back in Georgia. At Eastwood Middle, the hallways returned to their usual rhythm, lockers slamming, sneakers squeaking, the lunch line stretching too long. But something had shifted, subtle at first, then undeniable. DeShawn's name, once spoken in whispers or not at all, was now everywhere. Not because of what he had said, but because of what Miss Kellerman had claimed. It started with a local news segment, a fluff piece celebrating educational excellence. The clip aired one Thursday evening, sandwiched between a story about a cat rescued from a tree and a commercial for a fast food chain. But it hit hard. Standing at a podium inside the school gym, wearing her signature navy blazer and a pinned Eastwood Eagle brooch, was Miss Kellerman. A banner behind her read, Inspiring Excellence, Recognizing Teacher Impact. I first saw DeShawn's potential early on, she told the camera, her voice calm, polished. I remember thinking this young man sees numbers the way an artist sees light. So I challenged him. I pushed him. And when the opportunity came, I personally recommended him for advancement. The words slid smoothly from her mouth. Polished lies, dressed in the language of mentorship. The camera panned to the audience. Applause. PTA members beaming. The principal nodding. A framed certificate was handed to Miss Kellerman. It read, for dedication to academic excellence, in recognition of the success of DeShawn Carter. DeShawn's name, her award. She was celebrated not for the reality of her actions, but for the perception she carefully engineered. In the weeks following DeShawn's departure, Kellerman had begun weaving a new story. She said she had spotted his talent early, that she'd challenged him with college-level problems, and that her rigorous standards had helped him blossom. She even submitted fabricated emails to the district drafts of recommendation letters she claimed to have sent to math organizations and scholarship committees. No one checked the dates. No one questioned why DeShawn hadn't attended the ceremony. They simply embraced the narrative. The school needed a hero, and she fit the mold far better than a quiet black boy from the wrong side of town. Meanwhile, DeShawn only found out by accident. A clip of the ceremony surfaced on social media and landed in a group chat run by STEM youth mentors. One of the mentors, confused, forwarded it to DeShawn. Didn't realize your teacher was so involved. DeShawn stared at the video, jaw tight, blood humming in his ears. He watched her say his name, watched her take credit for the very work she tried to suppress. There was no mention of the viral video, no trace of the moment she mocked his father, no record of the zero she'd marked on his unsolvable problem. Just praise. Applause. Recognition. He showed the video to Marcus that night. Marcus watched in silence. When it ended, he turned off the TV. She's playing the long game, he muttered. What do? DeShawn asked. We keep receipts, Marcus replied. And we wait. But someone else wasn't waiting. Rael Sanders, an independent education journalist, known for digging into racial inequities in public schools, had been tipped off about DeShawn's story weeks earlier. The leaked clip of Ms. Kellerman's classroom ridicule had caught her attention, but this rewrite of history, that was the final push. She began researching immediately. Within days she obtained DeShawn's academic file. It held no letters of recommendation, no referrals, no enrichment reports from Ms. Kellerman. In fact, several entries suggested DeShawn was struggling with abstract reasoning, a claim directly contradicted by his mathematical proof. Then Brielle contacted DeShawn. They met virtually no cameras, no pressure. She asked questions carefully, respectfully. DeShawn answered with precision, never exaggerating, never embellishing. When Brielle asked about Miss Kellerman's claim of mentorship, DeShawn simply said, "She told me not to expect too much." The quote became her headline, "Not to expect too much. How one teacher tried to rewrite a student's genius." The article dropped quietly on a Wednesday morning. It was long, detailed, and filled with evidence, timestamps, falsified documents, quotes from students who had witnessed the classroom humiliation, and even a statement from Dr. Elia Dubois confirming DeShawn had never been referred by his school or teacher. What started as a whisper roared into a wildfire. Twitter exploded. Educators began reposting the story. Former students of Ms. Kellerman chimed in with eerily similar experiences. Underestimated, dismissed, passed over. The local paper picked it up, then a national education blog, then a morning talk show. The school district, caught off guard, released a vague statement. "We are reviewing recent claims and remain committed to academic integrity." But the damage was already done. The applause Ms. Kellerman once received turned to suspicion. Her story cracked. Her colleagues grew distant. Parents began questioning what else had been rewritten over the years. A petition was launched to audit teacher evaluations. And still, DeShawn remained quiet. He didn't need to respond. The truth had finally found its own voice. But that didn't mean the fallout was over. 2 weeks later, a reporter reached out to the Geneva Institute where DeShawn's proof was being reviewed. She requested formal comment on how the student had come to their attention. They replied with a single line. "He reached out on his own, without referral. We recognized his brilliance immediately. No teacher mentioned, no gatekeeper needed." And yet, despite the exposure, the school did not rescind Miss Kellerman's award. The district chalked it up to confusion and overlapping narratives. No apology, no public correction, just silence. But Brielle wasn't done. In her follow-up story she wrote, "Even when the truth breaks through, institutions often refuse to adjust their story, because doing so would mean admitting the truth was never theirs to begin with." Her final paragraph hit hardest. "This isn't just a story about a boy who solved a problem. It's about a system that wanted to own the answer without ever believing in the student who gave it." And still the momentum built. A producer from a major documentary series called Marcus Carter the following week. They wanted to tell the full story. Interviews, archives, footage. Marcus asked DeShawn. He said yes, but only if the story focused on the truth. Not the myth, not the moment, but the pattern. But one journalist investigating education bias caught wind of the lie. Rael Sanders didn't stop at one article. She knew DeShawn's story wasn't an isolated tragedy. It was part of a hidden pattern. For every gifted black student dismissed, for every teacher who rewrote failure into their own triumph, there were dozens more buried under silence and shame. She wanted evidence, and she got it. She started with anonymous tips, emails from former Eastwood teachers, district interns, even janitorial staff. Then she filed FOIA requests for staff communications, committee meeting minutes, and student performance audits. The deeper she dug, the uglier the truth became. There were staff emails from years ago, casually mocking students of color for acting smarter than they are. A counselor's memo that read, "This student has attitude. Recommend general math next semester." That student had tested in the top 3% statewide. Even worse were the recordings. Audio from teacher-only meetings, where some faculty laughed about quota kids getting into honors classes. In one clip, a department head could be heard saying, "Just because a kid can mimic what they see online, doesn't make them a prodigy." The bias wasn't loud. It wasn't openly hostile. It was quiet, coded, professional. The kind of racism that wears a smile and claims to just be protecting standards. But the true heartbreak came from the students. One by one, They began to come forward. Some were teenagers. Some were now college-bound. Some had left school early. Disillusioned. Discouraged. Marisol Jennings, now 19, spoke through tears. I corrected my 6th grade teacher once in class. Just once. And the next week, I was dropped from advanced math. They said I was disrespectful. I was 12. Jamal Lewis described how his award-winning science project disappeared hours before the district showcase. I checked twice. It was set up the night before. Then suddenly, it was gone. They said there was a mix-up. The kid who won used a poster board with printed Wikipedia pages. Others told similar stories. Classwork that went ungraded. Gifted testing denied. Teachers who said, "People like you should focus on more practical paths." Brielle compiled the evidence meticulously, linking names, dates, memos, and outcomes. Her report hit the internet like a lightning strike. "Excellence denied, the racial gatekeeping inside our schools," was the headline. It trended within hours. National outlets picked it up. Education boards scrambled to draft statements. School administrators gave half-hearted apologies, citing miscommunications and unintended disparities. But Eastwood Middle School did not apologize. Instead, it retaliated. 3 days after the article dropped, the district quietly released a PDF labeled Disciplinary Records, DeShawn Carter, to a local news affiliate known for favoring conservative spin. The document was barely 2 pages long, but every line was loaded with implication. It referenced multiple incidents of tardiness, uncooperative behavior, and difficulty accepting instruction. It claimed DeShawn had a pattern of defiance. One note described him arguing with authority over quiz content, referring to the very moment he had correctly challenged Miss Kellerman's flawed equation. The school's message was clear. DeShawn wasn't the victim. He was a troublemaker. They had taken the truth and weaponized it into a character attack. The backlash was swift. Comment threads turned ugly. Posts labeled him entitled, overhyped, and another kid being used for a political agenda. And DeShawn saw it all. He sat in his new dorm in Cape Town, one of Thorntech's global learning hubs, reading the threads in silence. His stomach twisted, not because he believed what they said, but because he knew people like Ms. Kellerman did. He didn't cry, but he didn't speak for hours. When Marcus called, his voice was calm, but laced with steel. "You remember what I told you about storms, son?" DeShawn nodded on the other end. "You are the storm. Let them run for cover." Still, the damage wasn't done. That week, one of DeShawn's invitations to speak at a national youth summit on education equity was quietly rescinded. No explanation, just a vague message about restructuring the panel lineup. And yet, something unexpected happened. One of the board members who had read Brielle's articles, an education advocate named Regina Pollard, resigned in protest and published an open letter. It read, "When a system feels threatened by truth, it punishes the truth teller. I stand with DeShawn Carter and every student who's ever been told they're too much, too loud, or too smart for the skin they're in." That letter went viral too, but so did something else. An anonymous account on Twitter, known only as @whistlegrade, posted screenshots of internal chats between Eastwood administrators. The messages made it clear. The district knew about the bias. They had meetings about tone policing teachers. They had warnings from multiple parents. They had received formal complaints, and they buried every one. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't just about DeShawn. It was about a culture. Brielle wrote again. This time her headline was simple: "What they tried to hide." Inside were screenshots, quotes, cover-ups, and silence from those who had the power to act and chose not to. And in the center of it all, the pattern was undeniable. Students of color flagged as aggressive, unteachable, or disruptive for doing what white students were praised for: correcting, questioning, excelling. By week's end, the state education board had launched a formal investigation. A civil rights group filed a lawsuit, and the school's principal was placed on administrative leave. Still, DeShawn never posted publicly, never gave a statement, until one day, without warning, he tweeted a single sentence. Just 11 words. "They rewrote my record because they couldn't rewrite my proof." The tweet shattered every silence. They released his disciplinary record, falsely claiming behavioral issues. The internet didn't just talk about DeShawn Carter. It dissected him. After Brielle's exposés and the district's retaliatory smear attempt, DeShawn's name was no longer confined to academic circles or education reform blogs. He became the center of a media storm. a lightning rod for every argument America was already having about race, giftedness, discipline, and what it meant to be the right kind of smart. On one side, progressive outlets praised him as a prodigy, a symbol of buried genius finally unearthed. They called him a mind that could reshape math as we know it. Hashtags like DeShawn solved it, and Let Geniuses Rise trended for days. Think pieces filled columns with comparisons to Alan Turing, Ramanujan, even Einstein. Professors tweeted their support. Activists rallied behind him. But on the other side, something uglier grew. Cable news anchors, mostly white and polished, raised eyebrows and asked pointed questions in concerned tones. Should we really be celebrating a child accused of behavioral problems? One panelist asked. He's brilliant. Yes, but genius doesn't excuse arrogance. Another chimed in. Photos of DeShawn with a neutral expression were labeled defiant. Footage of him calmly responding to a reporter was captioned, "Confrontational teen speaks out." The media didn't say the words outright, but the subtext was deafening. Was he grateful enough? Was he humble enough? Was he safe enough? Podcast debated whether he was the new face of academic activism, or just another gifted student being politicized by the left. A viral TikTok influencer, known for pseudo-intellectual commentary, posted a video titled, "Is DeShawn Carter being used by woke media?" It racked up 2 million views in 24. Meanwhile, DeShawn said nothing. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he understood the weight of every word he hadn't spoken yet. Every moment he stayed silent, the world filled in the blanks for him. He let them. Until the invitation arrived. The World Youth Forum, a global summit of young leaders, scholars, and changemakers, invited DeShawn to deliver the closing keynote in Johannesburg. It was a platform seen by millions, translated in real time into dozens of languages. Nobel winners, UN delegates, and presidents would be in attendance. When the invite came, DeShawn hesitated. He had no interest in being anyone's mascot. He didn't want to become a feel-good story, tied with a bow. He didn't want his trauma spun into a TED Talk. But Marcus said something that shifted everything. Say it how you want, but don't let them speak instead of you. So DeShawn accepted. On the day of the speech, he stood backstage in a crisp charcoal suit. No tie, no flashy shoes, just him. The teleprompters were loaded, but he'd asked for them to be blank. The forum's organizers had requested a 10-minute address on academic resilience. He had something else in mind. As he stepped onto the stage, the audience quieted. He looked out at rows of scholars, policymakers, teens with bright eyes, and adults who had once been silenced kids like him. And then he began. I was never taught that I was brilliant. A pause. I was taught that I was polite, that I was well-spoken, that I was not like the others, that I should stay in my lane, that ambition was arrogance, if it didn't wear the right skin. The audience leaned in. I solved a math problem that some say should have taken me years. But what really took years was learning how to prove I belonged in the room. Not the room of mathematics, but the room of belief. Cameras clicked. Some people stopped breathing. When I showed my work, they said it must be fake. When I stayed quiet, they said I was hiding. When I spoke up, they said I was ungrateful. When I kept solving, they said I was showing off. And when my teacher took the credit, they gave her an award. The silence turned electric. But I'm not angry. He let the sentence sit. I'm exhausted. And that was when the room broke. Applause began, slow, deliberate, then rising into a roar. Some stood, some wept. He continued. I'm here to say this: genius exists in every zip code, every skin tone, every language. But we lose it every day because it doesn't sound like what we expect or look like what we're told is safe. Then, softer. Brilliance isn't the exception. It's the rule we've been too scared to write. 10 minutes became 15. By the time he finished, even the translators had gone quiet. The speech spread globally. In less than an hour, the hashtag #brilliance is the rule eclipsed every previous trending topic. Clips were played on every major network. Schools began assigning it as required viewing. Protesters held signs that said, "Let us be brilliant too." But it also brought new heat. Commentators accused the forum of pushing a racialized agenda. Think tanks questioned whether DeShawn's speech was too emotional. A former Secretary of Education tweeted that DeShawn should focus on academics, not activism. But the world had already chosen its response. By week's end, 10 universities extended honorary offers to DeShawn. Private donors pledged new grants for underrepresented prodigies. And most shockingly, a national committee formed to investigate racial gatekeeping in education, named the Carter Commission. And yet, despite it all, DeShawn remained grounded. One journalist, trying to provoke him, asked, "So are you a genius or a troublemaker?" DeShawn only smiled. "Maybe I'm both." His speech shattered expectations and went viral globally. The world had moved faster than Eastwood Middle ever expected. By the time DeShawn's speech at the World Youth Forum went viral, reaching every major news outlet and university platform, the school district that once dismissed him found itself cornered. Emails poured in from advocacy groups, educators, and angry parents demanding accountability. The school board's voicemail was full. Their social media comments were flooded. And yet for days, the administration said nothing. They tried to wait it out, hoping the news cycle would move on. But DeShawn's story had become more than a headline. It was a symbol, a mirror, a reminder of how easily the system erased brilliance when it came in black skin. Under mounting international scrutiny, the board finally called an emergency press conference. The announcement was streamed live across local channels. At a long table under harsh fluorescent lights sat the superintendent, 2 board members, and Ms. Kellerman herself. The superintendent began, reading stiffly from a statement. "We at Eastwood Middle School recognize that certain actions and comments made in the past were inconsistent with our values of inclusion, integrity, and educational fairness. We would like to extend a formal apology to the Carter family and to the broader community for any distress caused." The words were polished, sanitized, an apology that apologized for reaction, not for harm. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes. When it was Miss Kellerman's turn to speak, she cleared her throat, adjusted her blazer, and delivered the performance of her life. "I want to make it clear," she said, her tone trembling with what could almost pass as vulnerability, "that I never intended to hurt DeShawn. He was always one of my most promising students. But lately I've become the target of an unfair campaign to destroy my reputation. This isn't accountability, it's cancel culture." She paused, looking directly at the cameras. "I am being painted as a racist because I pushed a student to do better. Is that what education is now? Are we punishing teachers for demanding excellence?" The room buzzed. Her words were calculated, weaponized. She knew exactly what she was doing. By the end of her statement, she wasn't apologizing. She was rebranding herself as the victim. Within hours, her allies, the same quiet parents and board members who had defended her for years, rallied online. Hashtags like "teachers under attack" and "let educators teach" began trending in certain corners of social media. Conservative talk shows invited her for interviews. She accepted every one. In her first op-ed for the National Tribune, she wrote, "I was canceled for caring too much. I believed in rigor. I believed in standards, and I became the villain because my student became a star. It was a masterclass in manipulation, but it didn't last." 3 days later, Brielle Sanders received a package from an anonymous source. No return address. Just a USB drive in a padded envelope, labeled in black marker, "Staff soon call, April 3rd. Curiosity turned to nausea as Brielle hit play. The footage showed Miss Kellerman and Principal Hartley on a private staff meeting. Their faces were small squares in the corner of a shared screen. The conversation was casual, too casual. "Hartley, about the Carter kid. We're getting too many emails. You sure you didn't recommend him for that camp?" Kellerman, "Of course not. You think I'd put my name on something like that? The boy's smart, sure, but not that smart. He's impulsive. It'll catch up to him." Hartley, "Parents can get loud about this stuff." Kellerman, "Then we just lose the paperwork. Easy fix." Silence. Hartley laughed. "You're terrible." Kellerman smirked. "I'm practical." The clip ended there. Brielle's hands shook as she leaned back from the screen. Lose the paperwork. The casual cruelty in those words felt heavier than any racial slur. She verified the metadata. The date matched. The timestamp aligned with the week. DeShawn's original summer program application mysteriously went missing. The evidence was damning. By morning, she published the story, "The Lost Files: How a Teacher Tried to Bury Brilliance." The article included the full transcript of the Zoom call, plus a statement from DeShawn confirming that the school had never followed up on his STEM camp application. The backlash was instant. TV anchors replayed the clip. Podcasts analyzed every pause. Social media exploded with outrage. Lose the paperwork trended for 48 hours straight. The superintendent issued another press release within hours, this time with visible panic. Effective immediately, Miss Kellerman has resigned from Eastwood Middle School. The district does not condone or tolerate any form of discriminatory behavior. But Kellerman didn't resign quietly. She uploaded a defiant video on YouTube. Half tearful confession, half manifesto. "They're destroying my life over a private conversation," she said, her voice trembling. "Every teacher jokes. Every teacher vents. This isn't racism. It's humanity. I've given 20 years to education, and this is how they repay me. They're making me the scapegoat for a system that's already broken." She had a point, but not the one she thought. By trying to absolve herself, she exposed exactly what everyone had suspected all along. The system wasn't broken because of one person. It was built to protect people like her. And for once it wasn't working. Brielle's article was picked up internationally. Journalists in the UK, South Africa, and Canada ran their own versions of the story, framing it as part of a global issue, how bias hid behind bureaucracy. Meanwhile, DeShawn stayed quiet until reporters cornered him outside the Thorn Tech Research Lab one evening. "Do you forgive her?" one asked. DeShawn paused, looking straight into the camera. His voice was calm. "I don't need her apology. I just need the next kid like me to be believed." That quote ran everywhere. 2 weeks later, a small envelope arrived at DeShawn's apartment in Georgia. Inside was a letter written in cursive, unsigned but familiar.
"Maybe I was wrong about you."
He didn't respond. He didn't need to. But the story wasn't finished. During the investigation into the leaked Zoom call, auditors discovered something else. Something buried deep in the district's internal database. Dozens of missing student applications. Names of high-performing kids whose records had mysteriously vanished before reaching elite programs. Each file tagged pending or misplaced. Among them was DeShawn's first submission, the original STEM summer camp form that had vanished over a year ago. It hadn't been lost. It had been deleted. Intentionally. They had tried to lose DeShawn's application to an elite STEM summer camp. In a matter of weeks, DeShawn Carter's name had shifted from being a footnote in a scandal to a rallying cry across the country. "Genius, not janitor," was first tweeted by a youth activist in Chicago, paired with a screenshot of Ms. Kellerman's now deleted quote. It spread like a spark in dry brush, retweeted by celebrities, educators, politicians, and students alike. Within hours, it became a movement. Placards appeared at school board protests bearing DeShawn's face next to the phrase. Street murals went up in Atlanta, Detroit, Oakland, depicting him with books in one hand and a broken lock in the other. Panels convened. Think pieces emerged with titles like "What Happens When We Doubt Brilliance Because of a Uniform" and "How Many DeShawns Have We Missed?" Scholarship funds opened in his name. Private donors pledged millions to support students of color in advanced STEM pathways. Public school districts scrambled to update equity policies. A national school equity task force was launched and named the Carter Commission. To many, DeShawn was no longer just a student. He was a symbol. But Marcus Carter never let the fame settle too deep into their lives. "You're not a hashtag," he reminded his son. "You're a human being, and people forget that fast." DeShawn listened. He didn't live for the noise. He lived for the math. Still, when the invitation came for the National Junior Mathematics Championship hosted in Atlanta, of all places, he hesitated. Going back to Georgia meant more than just returning to a city. It meant facing faces. Old ones. Cold ones. "I'm not going there to prove anything," he told Marcus. "You're going there to prove it to yourself," Marcus replied. The competition was set in a sprawling convention center, just 20 minutes from Eastwood Middle. 40 finalists from across the country, ages 12 to 15, gathered under bright lights and tight nerves. The air buzzed with tension, ambition, and quiet comparisons. DeShawn walked in wearing a plain black hoodie and sneakers. No entourage, no press badge, just his backpack and a sharpened pencil. Some students whispered, a few pointed, one leaned to another and said, "That's the kid from the math video, right?" He ignored them all. What he didn't expect, what made his chest tighten, was seeing two familiar faces sitting in the crowd. His old vice principal, Mrs. Talley, and a science teacher, who once told him he talked too much to be a math kid. Neither smiled. But they watched. The competition format was brutal. 3 rounds, written proofs only. No calculators, 1 oral defense. DeShawn breezed through round 1, solving a combinatorics puzzle in under 7 minutes. Round 2 was trickier. A recursive geometry pattern with a deceptive trap. 2 students flamed out. DeShawn paused halfway through, caught the flaw, and corrected it. He submitted with 30 seconds left. But it was round 3 that would test him most. Not the math, the judges. As the panel was introduced, one name froze him. Please welcome Judge DN3, Ava Kellerman, representing the University of Georgia's early admissions program. He knew the name. The posture. The chin tilt. The deliberate smile. Ms. Kellerman's daughter. The resemblance was haunting. Blonde, sharp-voiced, and calm in a way that felt rehearsed. DeShawn's heart pounded. He didn't flinch, but something in him snapped taut. The final problem was projected onto a screen for all to see. A probability convergence set tied into game theory. Complex, elegant, dangerous in the wrong hands. DeShawn read it twice, then closed his eyes. He imagined the bus his father drove every morning. The wheel in his hands. The way he hummed jazz while waiting for the last kid to board. That was clarity. That was rhythm. And that was the tempo he needed now. He wrote. Line after line, flawless logic, controlled execution. When he stood to deliver the oral defense, 3 judges watched with quiet interest. Ava's expression never changed. Until he said mid-proof, of course this assumes that we let the outcome be determined by the visible variable, not by the unseen bias beneath it. A few heads turned. He wasn't just solving anymore. He was speaking. An improbability like in life. DeShawn continued, our biggest errors come not from miscalculations, but from what we choose to ignore. A judge raised an eyebrow. He finished. Stepped back. Sat down. The room was silent for a beat too long. Then light applause. Not thunderous, but real. He returned to his seat. 10 minutes later, scores were posted. DeShawn Carter. First place. It wasn't just a win. It was domination. Some clapped. Others stayed silent. But in the judges' lounge, Ava Kellerman sat stiff, staring at the score sheet, her lips pressed into a flat line. She pulled out her phone and began typing, furiously. Unbeknownst to her, another judge watched her screen from over her shoulder. Watched as she drafted a message to a university listserv. Carter kid is brilliant, but dangerous. Thinks he's some kind of prophet. Watch his attitude. The judge who saw it didn't speak up then. But she saved a screenshot. Because sometimes, even after victory, the clause still came out. DeShawn didn't know about the message. Not yet. But as he walked out of the building, his trophy tucked under his arm, he felt that something was still following him. Miss Kellerman's daughter was among the judges. The U.S. Junior Mathematics Championship was never meant to be a spectacle, but this year it was. Ever since DeShawn Carter's name had hit global headlines, the math world watched him like a living anomaly, not just because of his age, not just because of his proof, but because of the tension he dragged into the room, racial, institutional, historic, a quiet war between what people expected genius to look like and what it actually was. Held in Washington, D.C., the event was streamed in 17 countries, with commentators offering live analysis like it was a tennis match. Viewers logged in from classrooms in Finland, tech labs in Seoul, even lecture halls at Oxford. But the real atmosphere wasn't online. It was in the auditorium, and it was heavy. Every time DeShawn moved, adjusted his hoodie, uncapped his pen, looked toward the clock, someone was watching, whispering. One parent said loudly to another, "Hope this isn't just another PR stunt." Another muttered, "It's good they're giving opportunities now, but let's see if he can actually hold his own." The judges sat high on a dais. They were from Italy, Japan, Brazil, Canada, and South Africa. Esteemed minds, but even they looked more curious than neutral when DeShawn's name was announced. He was the final competitor. As he stepped forward, the auditorium shifted, like everyone held their breath, not out of awe, but suspicion. The final problem was presented on a wide screen behind him, a deep abstract challenge involving nonlinear topology and dynamic equilibrium territory, usually reserved for postdoctoral theorists. Most of the room expected DeShawn to hesitate. He didn't. He picked up the chalk, not a marker, but chalk, as tradition required, and began to write. His first line was simple, elegant. The second connected to a lesser-known 1982 theorem, not even listed in most competition prep books. By the third line, the Canadian judge leaned forward. The Italian one whispered something into her recorder. By the fourth, the silence became sacred. And by the fifth, DeShawn broke the frame. He stepped away from the board, took a breath, then began narrating. Mathematics, he said softly, isn't about answers. It's about permission. Who's allowed to take up space on the page? Who's allowed to challenge the rules written before them? A ripple ran through the audience. But equations don't care what you look like. They care if you respect their rhythm. He turned back to the board. The next segment wasn't just correct. It was revolutionary. He used a visual compression model, a technique theorized but never proven to create a convergent shortcut that eliminated 3 unnecessary variables from the original proof. Gasps echoed. Judges scribbled notes furiously. The Japanese representative shook her head in astonishment. It wasn't just that he solved it. It was how he solved it. He stepped back. The chalk fell from his hand onto the tray with a soft clink. And then, nothing. A pause.
One beat.
Then another. And then applause. It started slowly, from the South African judge, then spread like wildfire. Soon the entire room stood. Even the skeptical parents. Even the judge from Princeton who had previously called DeShawn's earlier work unverifiable. He had done it. But he didn't smile. As the head judge approached the podium, holding a medal shaped like a Mobius strip, the symbol of infinite logic, there was a hush. DeShawn Carter, the judge began. We offer you this award not only for solving the challenge, but for transforming how we understand the challenge itself. DeShawn stepped forward, took a breath, and didn't reach for the medal. I can't accept it, he said. Gasps. The auditorium froze. Even the judges looked stunned. The head judge frowned. Excuse me. DeShawn's voice didn't waver. I can't accept an award from a system that had to be dragged to see me. Murmurs rose instantly. Some clapped. Others scowled. I've been excellent for a long time. But this is the first time excellence looked like me, and was believed because of a camera, a scandal, and a social media campaign. Not because of the math, not because of the work, but because someone finally watched. He turned to the crowd. And if I accept this medal today, it says that the problem was fixed, that the system is fine, that brilliance just needs a moment, and a platform. But the truth is, there are thousands like me who will never see this stage. His eyes scanned the audience. So I thank you, truly, for seeing me. But I don't need your medal. I needed your belief. He bowed his head once and walked away. Stunned silence held the room hostage. The judges didn't follow. But Marcus was waiting backstage. When DeShawn reached him, the two stood quietly for a moment. You didn't take it? Marcus asked. DeShawn shook his head. It felt unfinished. Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. It was perfect. The clip went viral within minutes. But not because of the equations. Because of the refusal. Because of the boy who had everything to gain, but chose the truth over the trophy. Educators called it defiance. Students called it liberation.
And DeShawn?
He called it justice. He was offered an award, but he refused. The auditorium still buzzed long after DeShawn left the stage. Judges whispered. Parents argued. Cameras flashed. No one quite knew what to make of what they had witnessed. A 13-year-old boy had just refused the most prestigious youth mathematics award in America, and done so not out of pride but principle. By the next morning, his name wasn't just trending, it was immortalized. The boy who said no blazed across news headlines. Editorials flooded in from every direction. Some hailed him as a symbol of courage and clarity. Others accused him of being ungrateful, political, and indoctrinated. DeShawn Carter, who had spent most of his life unseen, had now become unavoidable. CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera all requested interviews. The White House press secretary was asked about him twice in a single briefing. He didn't respond to any of them, but he did say yes to one request, an exclusive live interview on the front line, a major primetime news program known for its no-nonsense approach. When the camera lights came up, DeShawn sat quietly across from veteran journalist Raymond Fielder. There were no notes in front of him, just his hands folded calmly in his lap. Raymond began softly. DeShawn, the world is calling you everything from a genius to a rebel. Why did you turn down the medal? DeShawn took a breath. His voice, calm but sharp, carried through the studio. Because I didn't need it to prove what I already knew, he said. They didn't see me until the world did. They didn't believe in me until they were forced to. I didn't want a medal for surviving their disbelief. The words landed like a tremor. Raymond leaned forward. Do you think the system is broken? DeShawn shook his head slowly. It's not broken. It's working exactly how it was built to. The silence in the studio was heavy, purposeful, the kind that stretches truth into revelation. He continued, "It rewards comfort. It rewards familiarity. It rewards the same faces, same voices, same last names. And when someone different walks in with something they can't explain, instead of learning from it, they label it." Raymond's eyes softened. "What do you want to see change?" DeShawn hesitated, then smiled faintly. "I don't want special programs for kids like me. I want schools to stop losing kids like me. Stop losing their applications, their confidence, their hope. We don't need charity, we need opportunity." Within minutes of the interview airing, social media exploded. That one line, "You didn't see me until the world did," was replayed millions of times. It became the quote of the year. Murals went up again, now with his words painted beneath his portrait. Professors cited it in lectures about educational reform. Even politicians co-opted it, twisting its meaning to fit speeches. But the core message couldn't be diluted. Ivy League deans began reaching out. Stanford, Harvard, Yale. They didn't just want to meet DeShawn, they wanted to study him. His problem-solving approach, his ability to translate complexity into emotion, his defiance of conformity. But DeShawn refused interviews with all of them. Instead, he replied with a single sentence to every inquiry: "Help fund the next generation of students who look like me." The emails that followed were cautious, promising, performative. But DeShawn didn't stop pushing. He collaborated with Brielle Sanders to launch the Carter Initiative, a nonprofit dedicated to identifying overlooked talent in public schools. They built mentorship pipelines, research grants, and math clubs in underfunded districts. Within months, the initiative raised over $3 million, largely from private donors and young activists inspired by DeShawn's story. Meanwhile, Eastwood School District faced a storm it couldn't contain. The leaked Zoom call between Ms. Kellerman and the principal had already damaged their credibility. But DeShawn's latest statement, aired live to millions, reignited the conversation. Protesters gathered outside the district headquarters. Former students came forward with new accounts of discrimination and academic sabotage. The pressure reached the state level. The governor ordered a preliminary inquiry into racial bias within Georgia's public schools. But what began as a local investigation soon drew national attention. Senators demanded federal oversight. The Department of Education quietly opened an internal review. The nation was now asking questions administrators had avoided for decades. Who decides which children get labeled gifted? Who decides who's difficult? Who benefits from low expectations? And who pays the price? At home, Marcus Carter watched every news cycle with conflicted pride. He'd always wanted DeShawn to be seen. But not like this. Not dissected, debated, idolized. One night, as DeShawn sat cross-legged on the floor, reading through a flood of messages from students who said he'd changed their lives, Marcus spoke quietly. "Son, I'm proud of you. But fame's a shadow. It moves fast, and it fades faster." DeShawn looked up. "Then what lasts?" "The truth," Marcus said. "That's what you stand on when the spotlight moves." It was simple advice, but it stuck. The next day, DeShawn went back to work. Not on interviews or press tours, but on his next paper, an exploration of non-linear pattern prediction. The same drive, the same silence, the same brilliance. But he didn't know what was coming next. Late one afternoon, Brielle called him with a tone he'd never heard before. Half disbelief, half fear. "DeShawn," she said, "you need to see this." She forwarded an official PDF stamped with the U.S. Department of Education's seal. The header read, "Federal investigation launched into Eastwood School District. Allegations of systemic racial bias and data suppression." It listed multiple violations: tampering with student applications, falsifying reports, inequitable tracking, and manipulation of academic records. And at the bottom, one line stood out. This investigation was initiated following public testimony and media evidence provided by independent journalist Brielle Sanders and student mathematician DeShawn Carter. DeShawn stared at the screen, his reflection mirrored faintly in the glass. For the first time in months, he smiled. Not the proud smile of a prodigy, but the quiet smile of a boy who realized he'd done more than solve an equation. He'd solved the silence. A federal investigation was launched into the school district's racial bias. 2 years had passed since DeShawn Carter first solved the unsolvable. He was 15 now. Taller, more composed, still humble, but sharper. The boy who once sat in the back of a dusty Georgia classroom was now walking through the glass-paneled corridors of SpaceX's Hawthorne campus, wearing a badge labeled Theoretical Intern Carter. SpaceX hadn't just invited him to observe. They brought him in to contribute. Elon Musk had stepped away from daily operations. But the company's head of research had followed DeShawn's journey since the infinity curve proof. When DeShawn published his second major paper, an optimization model for fuel-efficient landing sequences, he was 14. That sealed it. He didn't just belong in the room. He was the room. But DeShawn didn't walk in like he owned it. He walked in remembering exactly where he came from. He wore the same beat-up sneakers from his early interviews, refused media attention during his onboarding, and when asked to pose for the team's intern spotlight, he stood beside the janitorial crew, saying, "These are the folks who make this place work." The staff loved him for it. But more importantly, he used his position for others. That summer, instead of requesting elite projects or private lab time, DeShawn asked to start a mentorship track inside the internship program, specifically for Black and Latino students from low-income districts. His pitch: space deserves every kind of mind. Management hesitated. HR pushed back. He persisted. And within 3 weeks, the Ignite track was born. 10 students, hand-selected from overlooked schools nationwide, flown in, housed, and guided by DeShawn personally. They shadowed engineers, attended code reviews, asked questions no one had asked before. He made sure they sat at the main tables. Not in corners, not behind glass. "You don't get better rockets," DeShawn said in one team meeting, "by building them with the same voices over and over." His cohort called him Coach D. One student cried during their first simulation review, saying, "No one ever said I belonged in a place like this." DeShawn just smiled and replied, "You were always the future. They just didn't update the map." And through it all, he never stopped crediting Marcus. In interviews, in private convos, even in his bio on the SpaceX internal dashboard, son of a bus driver, forever riding with him. The impact was cultural. Parents across the country began quoting Marcus in local PTA meetings. Memes surfaced of him standing beside DeShawn, holding a lunchbox and wearing his district-issued jacket, with the caption, "Dignity drives the future." Talk shows called him the dad of the decade. He declined them all. "I didn't do anything fancy," he told one journalist outside a grocery store. "I just kept showing up. And I let my boy dream bigger than the parking lot." But not everyone celebrated. Anonymous threads popped up online, questioning DeShawn's credentials. Again, a retired professor accused him of algorithmic plagiarism. Despite no evidence, a major outlet ran a subtle hit piece with the headline, "Boy Genius," or "Brilliant Branding." But this time, the internet had answers. Thousands of students DeShawn had mentored responded in force. "DeShawn Built Me" trended for a week. Teachers shared how their schools now had Carter Initiative math clubs. Parents spoke about their kids returning to class with pride instead of shame. And SpaceX? They promoted him to lead intern by July. One day, while walking out of the clean room where prototype engine parts were being tested, DeShawn's phone buzzed. It was a Los Angeles number. He answered. A woman's voice said, "Hi, this is Noelle Hastings. I'm a director with Netflix Originals. I'm not calling as a producer. I'm calling as a mother. My son is one of the kids in your Ignite program. He's never smiled this much in his life." DeShawn grinned. "He's doing great. I want to tell your story," Noelle said. "But not just yours. You and your dad. The bus. The classroom. The problem. The refusal. All of it." DeShawn went quiet. "I'll fly to Georgia," she said. "No film crew. No pressure. Just a conversation." He looked out the window of the SpaceX campus, where a Falcon 9 rested on its side, waiting for assembly. The sky was wide. And so was the story. "Let me ask my dad," he said. That night, DeShawn sat across from Marcus in their modest rental home in LA, courtesy of Thorntech's housing program. "She wants to make a film," DeShawn said. Marcus raised a brow. "With actors and all?" "I think so." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Long as they don't have me crying in a parking lot. I did enough of that already." They laughed. Then Marcus grew serious. "If it helps another kid get seen, then yeah. Let's talk." DeShawn texted Noelle 2 words. "We're in." A Netflix director approached them for the rights to their story. The podium was framed by marble columns. The crowd was hushed. Camera shutters clicked softly as DeShawn Carter stepped up to receive the National Medal for Youth Innovation at the White House Rose Garden, a ceremony broadcast live to millions across the country. He was 23, taller, more composed. A quiet confidence replacing the cautious silence he once wore like armor. He stood there not as a symbol but as a force. No longer the boy genius dismissed because of his father's job, his skin, or his zip code, but a man who had changed how the nation defined brilliance. The president handed him the medal with a smile. Your work on predictive modeling has saved lives. Your commitment to equity has reshaped education. Thank you, DeShawn. The audience stood and applauded. Among them were senators, scientists, tech billionaires, and DeShawn's old SpaceX mentors. But none clapped harder than the man seated in the third row, wearing the same district-issued bus jacket he had worn for over a decade. Marcus Carter. He never wanted a suit. He never needed one. As DeShawn adjusted the medal around his neck, he turned to the mic and spoke, not with grandeur but with purpose. I'm grateful, he began, but this medal doesn't erase the road that led here. The audience quieted. I was once the kid who got ignored in classrooms, the one whose papers got lost, the one teachers thought was too smart and too confident to be trusted. Not because I misbehaved, not because I wasn't capable, but because I didn't fit what they expected. Every eye stayed fixed on him. They called me gifted when it became convenient. They called me brilliant when it became profitable. But before the applause, before the headlines, there was racism, there was silence, and there was almost erasure. He paused, then said the words that would echo for years. This medal should have gone to the boy I was before you believed in me. Because that boy deserved it too. The audience stood again. This time not just in applause, but in reverence. After the ceremony, reporters crowded him. Scholars tried to shake his hand, and students asked for photos. He gave them time, but never let it consume him. Fame didn't define him. Work did. In the years that followed, DeShawn launched a non-profit incubator for low-income innovators. He built tech that translated advanced math into local dialects, so underfunded schools could teach complex ideas without expensive textbooks. He turned down dozens of multi-million-dollar board offers to stay focused on youth advocacy. And most remarkably, he returned to Eastwood Middle School. Not as a guest, as a quiet observer. He sat in the back of the same classroom where Miss Kellerman once belittled him. The school had changed since then. Policies reformed, teachers diversified, but DeShawn didn't come to evaluate. He came to see. A young black student stood at the board, nervously solving a proof. The teacher, kind but unsure, corrected him gently. He got flustered. DeShawn noticed. After class, he approached the student. You solved it right. You just wrote it backwards. The kid blinked. Wait, really? Yeah. I used to do the same thing. What's your name? DeShawn smiled. Doesn't matter. Just keep solving. He walked away, unseen by most, and that's how he liked it. Still, his story was everywhere. Textbooks used his journey as a case study. Universities added his speech to their ethics curriculum. The Carter Commission grew into a full department of academic equity. He was nominated for a Nobel in applied mathematics. But he never made the work about himself. When asked once by a journalist, "What's your proudest achievement?" he answered, "That my dad still drives the bus, not because he has to, but because he chooses to." Marcus never left Georgia. He kept his route, even after retirement. Said he liked seeing the morning light through the windshield, that it reminded him of where it all started. And whenever a kid looked confused or nervous at the curb, Marcus would smile and say, "Got a little genius in you? Bet you do. Come on in." The final twist came not from DeShawn, but from the generation behind him. By the time he turned 30, over 60 students who had been mentored through the Carter Initiative had become engineers, teachers, mathematicians, founders. They built satellites, classrooms, curriculum. But more importantly, they built confidence in places where it had once been stripped away. They started referring to themselves as the Brilliance line, a direct continuation of what DeShawn had sparked. And yet DeShawn never saw himself as a legend. He often said, "I just wrote down what others never got a chance to say." The final scene of the Netflix adaptation closed on a slow pan of DeShawn walking into an underfunded school in Mississippi, handing a notebook to a young girl who didn't know yet that she would change the world. That scene, like his life, wasn't about glory. It was about passing the pen. But even as the world celebrated, DeShawn never let the final word be about success. Because at every speech, every event, every moment someone called him a miracle, he would gently remind them, "There are thousands more like me, and they're still waiting to be seen, and thousands more like him, are still waiting to be seen. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever watched someone's brilliance go ignored just because of where they came from, then you know this story isn't just about DeShawn. It's about all the voices still waiting to be heard. Type yes if you believe genius has no color. Subscribe if this broke your heart and opened your eyes.